I invite you to put them into practice.
Let's begin with the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. I don't hear a question, but I do have a fax question from Finalco in Medellin, Colombia. And here's the question, Dennis. You've explained that different attitudes about time are found in different countries. I see this can affect how we interact, particularly in meetings. Could you say something about how this affects other forms of communication besides meetings?
Thank you, Peter. What I think about here, particularly since it's become so important to so many of us, is interacting via email and using the internet. For whatever reason, we tend to view the use of email as an informal form of communication. And because of that, we often say things that we probably shouldn't. So people who interact frequently with customers or clients or colleagues via the internet probably need to develop, or organizations that have people that do this, need to develop protocols for behavior on the internet.
It's not really a private form of communication at all, is it?
It is not a private form of communication. Obviously, other people can see the emails, so using appropriate language, protocol for things like responding to email messages is important. It should be done in a timely manner, not just put off. Sure. All of us probably have had the experience of colleagues who never respond to our emails, and that's not effective. We also need to make sure that people understand who the messages are going to and how important that is. We probably all know of circumstances where two people are fighting via email and the messages get sent to colleagues and to bosses and supervisors inappropriately. So there needs to be protocol developed for that as well.
And they can be forwarded intentionally or sometimes inadvertently.
Yes, people need to understand if they just hit the reply button, it may go to everybody who's on the email list. There are ways to ensure that it only goes to the person that you want it to go to. So there are a number of issues with email in particular that I think we all need to understand. The appropriateness of the language we use. People tend to be too often nasty in their email messages, would even say things that they wouldn't say to a person face-to-face.
And how about other forms of communication? Let's move back from the electronic environment and ask this question. When you're traveling to a different country, how do you know how to communicate informally? Suppose we're just going out for coffee or drinks or something.
Well, I guess for me, a general ground rule is respect. Respecting that the other person that you're dealing with may well have different understandings and attitudes about time. They may not show up for that coffee when you do. They may, on the way there, see friends or family and deal with them rather than you as important in their life. So I'm obviously responding from the standpoint of somebody from a monochronic culture to somebody who might be from a polychronic culture. Snail mail, I hadn't thought about that until just now, but what we refer to as snail mail, but the old written letter and documents, also we need to take into account now that we're dealing with people who may well be halfway around the world or in countries where the mail system doesn't work as effectively. We need to make sure that time is taken for these kinds of letters to get to the person and to get a response back that just may take much more time.
Very good. We do have a caller now, I believe from Guanajuato. Come in, please.
Warm greetings to everyone. In like a polychronic culture such as Mexico is, what would be the best way to change over to a monochronic society? And I would like to say hi to all of the technological institutes in Irapuerto.
So how does a polychronic culture become more monochronic? Is there a way?
Yeah, I don't know that there's an answer to that directly. I think technology is forcing many organizations to adopt more monochronic procedures, partially because if they deal with people in monochronic cultures, they're having to operate typically 24 hours a day, so the mid-afternoon siestas and things like that, there may well be a need for work to be accomplished during that period of time. Partially it's a question of respect, but for me at least I think it goes both directions. So it's not just a question of people in, for instance, Mexico or Latin America learning to deal with, for instance, American approaches to time, but Americans need to work the other direction as well.
So it goes both ways.
It goes both ways.
All right, we have another caller from Universidad de Valle de Matipac in Tepac, Nayarit. Come in, please. Hello.
Muy buenos días.
Buenos días.
Nuestra pregunta es la siguiente.
Good morning. Our question is the following. Due to the fact that many of the monochronic societies are developed countries, it is desirable then that polychronic societies then transfer over to a type of monochronic culture. Do you think this is necessary?
Kind of a similar question to the last one, but is that a real necessity? Is it important to do that?
Yeah, in a way, I think this is maybe the most important question. Does one culture need to become like another culture in order to maybe accept some of the developments of that other culture? And I don't have a good answer to that question. I guess I would like to believe that we can maybe accept some of the maybe developments of the more advanced countries, I don't like that terminology, without changing the basic nature of a culture. So maybe this time issue we'll have to just learn to deal with keeping each other's attitudes and just learn to respect each other's different values.
Now, the real difficult issue is being sensitive. Where are the most monochronic cultures? So if somebody from Latin America goes to one of these countries, Germany, Switzerland come to mind. What other ones?
Well, interestingly, it's not all just English-speaking. The UK and Australia are two very monochronic cultures and maybe just as bad as the United States. Germany, and particularly the German part of Switzerland, Northern Europe, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark are also very monochronic cultures.
So that's where you got to be on your monochronic toes, huh?
But interestingly, technology, as I indicated, is driving much of this attitude. Japan, even though it has a very polychronic sort of culture, is becoming very monochronic in how it deals with business.
In the business community.
So they expect people to be on time, and they pay very close attention to deadlines and that sort of thing.
Okay, we have a caller from Tecamac in Estado de Mexico. Come in, please. Your question.
Muy buenos días a todos. Reciban saludos de la Universidad Tecnológica de Tecamac.
Greetings from the University of Tecamac. My question is, an education organization, how can a university, for example, be assertive in terms of production from other organizations and breaking away from this polychronic culture? And how can we be more assertive in terms of time? Thank you very much.
Again, it's this basic question: does one culture have to adapt to another culture? In the educational setting, I think at least it begins with educating people about the differences, so that students understand that there may be differences. I guess because I come from a monochronic culture, my feeling is that things like classes have to start at a particular time and run for a particular period of time. But I also want to at least raise the question about whether that must be more flexible in a polychronic culture. Although just because of my own culture, I find it hard to understand how one might have a flexible starting time for a class and a flexible ending time for a class.
But is the internet and telecommunicating making us more polychronic in a way, because you can commute from your bedroom to your study and now you're online?
Great point. Yes, the internet also gives us the capability of responding when we want. So it becomes much more flexible in terms of communication. It's what we call sequential communication rather than same time communication. So, yeah, at least provides that opportunity. Interesting point.
Very good. A caller now from the Instituto Tecnológico in Santo Domingo. Hello, good morning.
Sí, gracias. Muy buenos días.
Buenos días.
Mi pregunta es que en esta sociedad
Good morning. My question, in this globalized society, with the high impact that we're receiving from all cultures, what are the success factors that you would recommend that we could take into account in order to be able to better administer our time? Thank you very much.
So how does a person administer their time? How do you really adjust to?
Yeah, this gets into some of the questions that deal with time management, and the two things that come to my mind immediately, obviously, are achieving objectives on a deadline, on a schedule, and that can be measured, that can be paid attention to. People can be held accountable for getting things done in a particular time frame. And the other one probably has to do with training people to focus on priorities. That is, spending their time on the high priority activities, which is again a monochronic cultural concept, but the attitude of efficiency or effectiveness does have to do with working on first things first.
And calendars and Palm Pilots, those things help us to schedule tasks and prioritize things?
They help us both to schedule tasks and prioritize things, and probably to stay on task.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for your excellent questions. Now we move to the second module of our program.
The first part of today's presentation dealt with different attitudes and behaviors related to time as expressed in differing cultures and countries, and how that affects international business. During this second module, we will deal with issues encountered in cross-border activities due to the people and organizations involved being located in different time zones and in different countries. Any time that groups, teams, task forces, or committees have members who reside in more than one country, a number of practical concerns related to time arise. Of course, all of the issues raised in the first section also apply. That is, such virtual or cross-border groups still must cope with the problems presented by group members coming from countries or cultures that have differing attitudes about time. But here we'll be concerned primarily with time issues related to things like time zones and holidays and meetings of groups when the group members are not physically co-located. So first, let's examine the types of organizations that must deal with these time zone concerns. Any of the following situations or organizations, when they involve group members who are not co-located, that is, the members must interact on a regular basis through some means other than meeting face-to-face. All of these involve concerns related to the participants being located in more than one time zone and in more than one country. These meetings can occur on a regular basis, such as daily or weekly or monthly, or they could occur infrequently on an irregular basis. But because the members of these groups are not co-located, that is, they are geographically dispersed, the meetings of these groups are often referred to as virtual and occur in some electronic form. For example, via the telephone in an audio conference, or via telephone or satellite in a video conference, or online in some form of live internet conference. So let me ask a question. Do you belong to any groups like this? Do you interact in a virtual way on a regular basis with people in other countries? In general, all of the following forms of groups can meet in these virtual forms. And here's just some of the types of groups. Boards of directors, who are made up of people from more than one country, who meet in a virtual form on either a regular scheduled basis or infrequently. Or committees, such as policy committees or strategy committees, or committees that just monitor various business activities that have to meet in a virtual way on a regular basis, to share and evaluate information, or even to make decisions and form recommendations. Or executive teams with members from more than one country, such as all the vice presidents for a global firm. Or a corporate headquarters that functions with representatives from various foreign operations, such as from foreign subsidiaries, or regional headquarters, or foreign acquisitions, joint ventures, and alliances. Or project teams, such as product development teams or programming teams that are purposely put together with members from multiple countries, but who are not relocated to be in one place, and thus they work with each other primarily through email and audio or video conferences. Or task forces who work on global problems, like for developing a global human resource information system that would involve members from multiple countries. Or action learning training programs which have employees from multiple countries who only see each other face-to-face on an irregular basis, but most of the time they meet in a virtual form. Or those who work in cross-border joint ventures and alliances that include employees from all of the partners, representing different countries, but who remain geographically dispersed, and for instance, purchasing agents or suppliers who deal with salespeople, customers in other countries, or people that they purchase from, when these agents and salespeople interact on a regular basis via electronic means with their suppliers or customers. All of these situations, the virtual interaction among the members involves a number of issues related to time. The functioning of every one of these groups is made more difficult and more complex because of the fact that they're being located in more than one country and or time zone. The first time-related issue that needs to be taken into consideration when planning any virtual meeting is the time of day for each of the members of the group at the time of the planned meeting. If the meeting is an infrequently scheduled meeting, then at least for that particular virtual get-together, attention needs to be made to whether or not it is possible for all members of the group to be able to meet during what are normal work hours for them. If this isn't possible, then there needs to be a way to decide who will be inconvenienced by the chosen time for the virtual meeting. If the group has regularly scheduled meetings, then there needs to be a way to rotate the meeting times so that different people experience, for example, participating during their off-work hours. That is, for example, the middle of the night, or for people who work in cultures with siesta time so that they don't have to be available in the afternoon. The same group members should not always be tasked with having to be awake in the middle of the night or to use their normal non-work time. A second time-related consideration for virtual meetings has to do with the members' scheduled holidays and vacation periods. The more countries involved, the harder it will be to find a common time for meetings at which at least one group member will not be on holiday or vacation. Of course, if there are only two people involved, but they're located in different countries or time zones, they too must pay attention to the time of day for each party and their respective holidays and vacation periods. This problem will require the members to develop a way to ensure that such holidays are considered when meetings are scheduled, and to ensure that the same members of the group, usually the initiators of the meetings or contact, are not always the members that get meetings to be scheduled at their convenience, i.e. they are not always the ones who do not have to show up during their holidays and vacations, because they are the ones who schedule the meetings during their normal work days. In addition to these concerns, there are a number of issues that arise with virtual groups that stem from varying aspects of time. First, the establishing of such groups takes more time than is the case for co-located groups. Communicating with everyone and establishing contact information and communication procedures just takes time. Enabling members to get to know each other well enough to interact effectively takes more time because of the aforementioned issues, as well as other issues that I'll discuss later in this section. Most organizations that use virtual teams have come to realize that it is important in the very beginning of the life of these teams that the members spend time in face-to-face social interaction. Largely this is in order to develop enough familiarity with each other to enhance their virtual interactions, particularly when any member's performance doesn't meet the expectations of the other members. In such situations, members who are familiar with each other, because they've spent social time getting to know each other, are much more likely to directly contact the member who is not meeting expectations in order to work out the problems that exist, rather than merely projecting blame and expressing frustration and stereotyping those people as never able to perform, which is often what happens when members don't know each other. The scheduling of face-to-face interaction between geographically dispersed teams takes time, as does, of course, the travel to such meetings. But in the end, this procedure will save time later when dealing with group interaction and performance problems. Interestingly, people who are familiar with working virtually can become accustomed to working without seeing their team members daily. They may even prefer working this way, calling face-to-face meetings a waste of time and a distraction. Indeed, they may even elect not to attend face-to-face team orientation meetings because of the demands of the travel and the time it takes for the get-to-know-each-other discussions. However, there's much controversy over whether groups can in fact work effectively without at least periodic face-to-face meetings. Most teams report that a face-to-face meeting with built-in social time is necessary for effective team interaction, at least at the beginning of the team's life cycle and probably periodically thereafter. This is to renew acquaintances and to work out process issues that arise during the virtual interactions. Virtual meetings themselves usually take or need more time for effective functioning. This is true for a number of reasons, including things like the following. Team members will have differing meeting styles, which will lead to an increased need for spending time on clarification and verification of information and decisions. Language itself can create many problems for virtual teams, and this also increases the time demands on such groups and their meetings. For example, there may be the need for language interpretation or translation. The need for translation can more than double the time it takes for meeting interaction. But even if everyone is speaking the same language, for example, English, if they come from either different English-speaking countries or English is a second or third language for some participants, individuals are likely to have varying levels of understanding of the meaning of certain words and phrases. There will always be an ongoing need to ensure that adequate time is taken to make sure all team members fully understand what is being said and what is meant by what is said. This will be a particularly important need for individuals who come from cultures where the context of the spoken word is so important. They may have much more difficulty than normal understanding and interpreting a virtual discussion, no matter the medium being used. A third area that creates additional time demands for virtual meetings is the difficulty faced when people are not face-to-face and cannot easily seek or give feedback when dealing with mistakes and problems. It takes more time in virtual format, and the people involved are probably even less trained and experienced in dealing with problems in this format than in normal interpersonal interactions, which further extends the time requirements. And lastly, giving everyone the opportunity to participate in virtual meetings can also be a time issue. The time constraints of the virtual format, that is, the time physically scheduled for the meeting, can make full participation a problem. Everyone has had the experience of running out of time in a meeting and not getting to the part of the agenda in which one is most interested. All the other time and cultural constraints on participation can make it hard to stay focused and on schedule. And communication channels in which only one person can speak at a time can further limit the exchange of information. The bottom line here is that virtual meetings can lead to many different problems due to time constraints that greatly increase the complexity and difficulty of achieving group objectives. Looking now at technology, all team members need common technology. This can be a significant problem for teams comprised of members from different countries. Thus, those who organize such teams may end up having to spend considerable time in the formative stages making sure that all team members can participate adequately because they have access to the same computer and phone technologies. Often there is not sufficient time to select and procure the best technology and to train team members to use it. Management must always keep in mind that procuring, delivering, installing, and training can all take much longer in some countries and in some locales than what might be expected in the parent country. Because of this, the team and/or its management will need to make decisions about the best possible technology or the best possible communication and coordination procedures given the schedule and resources available. Another issue that arises in today's highly competitive global marketplace is that all firms are under pressure to constantly upgrade the quality of their products and services. Any firm that does not respond to these pressures will find itself losing customers and market share to competitors which increasingly can come from almost any country. This constantly growing pressure gives competitive advantage to those firms which can most quickly bring new products and product and service innovations to market. Thus, all areas of today's business functions, for firms from anywhere in the world, require special attention to time. That is, reducing the time required for product design and innovation, making quality improvements, bringing new products to market, and responding to customer interests and needs. For virtual teams of any type to cope effectively with these time issues, I suggest 4 things, in addition to paying attention to the necessary scheduling issues. First, virtual teams should always err on the side of being explicit in exposing the team's understanding of agreements on dealing with time issues. Do not assume that common understandings are really shared or understood equally by all team members. The same words, phrases, and behaviors can mean very different things to different people, even within the same culture. And the variations in meaning among multiple cultures can be quite great. Well-functioning teams develop ways to make sure everyone is in tune with the functioning of the group and feels they are getting their fair opportunity to contribute. Second, effective teams understand that there is no best way of team management, except maybe that good teams find a way to facilitate full participation by all members, even given issues with time zones, holidays, and attitudes about time. If there is a best way, it is usually a new third way that is invented anew for every team. And third, the selection of computer and internet tools must be made with consideration of the fact that such tools inevitably include cultural assumptions about how people best communicate. It's probably based on the styles that are common in the country from which the people who develop the tools come, and they often don't equally support good communication from all cultures involved. People who don't share those assumptions or who have differing work styles will feel shortchanged and will be resistant. And thus the team will not have their full participation. The team must let this resistance surface and then look for ways to adapt the tools. Fourth, and finally, I suggest that during the orientation for any newly formed group, when the team is focusing on why they've come together and what is their purpose, it's critical to share information with all team members about the culture of all the other team members, which should include all the issues discussed during this presentation and discussion: members' time zones, their holiday schedules, and their values and attitudes about time that will affect how the group will interact. Personal fit with the team and a feeling of membership will only be resolved when each person has an internal grasp of how he or she is similar to and different from the others. And then discussion should initially be focused